Terraria has a substantial number of events to choose from, most of which kind of feel like they're just cosmetics. Even though all of them provide some value, I dare you name 4 events that are not moon related off the top of your head. By the way, that's how many moon events we have. And among the heavy hitters, we have arguably one of the best, the Old One's Army. At least that's what I think. And clearly, I'm the odd one out here because it feels like I have a discussion with people about this event at least once a week.
Now, before we continue, I must remind everyone that yes, you are allowed to dislike the event. The game is huge and it has a lot to offer. Not everything is for everyone. Personal preferences aside though, I do believe people should educate themselves better before using said preferences to make objective claims. Do you know how many people think True Knight's Edge is a bad weapon?
The projectile is slow and lags behind and—
Oh my god! Get up close and hit things! You're melee!
And when all is said and done, I am an Old One's Army defender, so maybe I'm just being biased, who knows? The event is fun, the sentries are unique, the armor sets are strong, and the things each of the 3 bosses drop are actually pretty decent. People just never give them a chance because of some weird biases and misconceptions. So without much more delaying, let me show you why the Old One's Army event is actually kind of pretty damn good, and why you should give it a chance. Breaking it down to steps. First, we have the event itself. This one will be quick. Things are really straightforward. Make a flat surface, place down your sentries, whack the enemies as they come. The longer the arena, the easier things get. Also, funny thing is, you don't need the arena to be perfectly straight. This allows for some creative builds like adding trenches and points of elevation here and there, though that's not to speak of its efficiency, just something cool you can do. Now, I can hear some of you complaining about its difficulty in the back there. Here's probably why you think this event is hard. You're skipping through its progression. The event is split into 3 tiers. The first, which is always up but only available after the Road Evil boss is defeated. The second, which unlocks after any mechanical boss is defeated. And the third, which unlocks after Golem is defeated. Each tier has different enemies, loot pools from bosses, and stuff the tavern keeps sells. Keeping up with the appropriate armor or sentry for your point of progression requires you to do the event at least once or twice during the previous tier. This way, you can save up to buy the upgraded sentry for the next tier, which makes the event as a whole a lot more manageable. I don't know about you, but having to handle the 3rd tier with a ballista rod would probably give me depression. As for the sentries themselves, I've seen some people trying to act disingenuously towards them by misusing them while ignoring another important aspect of the event: arena building. All you need to be set for everything that comes your way are 2 rows of platforms right above the center. This way, flying enemies can't just do their thing while you're not looking, and non-piercing sentries can harass enemies further in the back if it comes down to it. Overall, setting yourself up for the event is not that different from how you'd approach other bosses and such. Speaking of bosses, the Old One's Army has some of those, and they have some pretty interesting drops. The first tier is the most lacking, that is true, though that's not to say it's useless. If you skip the first tier, you're gonna be missing out on the war table, which only the Dark Mage drops. You'll only be seeing him again after Golem is down and at a much harder stage of the event. Also, usually, unlocking sentries allow you to use them against Skeletron, Queen Bee, probably, and Deerclops, also probably. So unlocking the ability to use them in pre-hard mode isn't bad either. Another plus from the Dark Mage is his trusty and reliable Apprentice's Scarf. A full sentry slot and 10% more summon damage at a stage of the game where hardly any accessories are class specific is actually really cool. Oh, and Squire Shield too. Matter of fact, all 4 of the event's accessories are identical and don't stack, unfortunately. But that's only the first tier. Moving up a couple bosses now, you just defeated any of the mechs and unlocked the 2nd tier of the event, where Ogre shows his ugly face, and with him, a brand new world of gearing up. As one would expect, not all gear is created equally. Starting off with the armor, the Squire set is by far the best available for both melee and summoner sets. Comparatively, the Apprentice, Huntress, and Monk sets are almost never used as full sets, instead in armor mixing for specific parts. Looking at Apprentices again, it gives more defense than Forbidden, Titanium, and Hallowed, while being equal to Adamantite. As for specific parts, its leggings are by and large the strongest mage piece of equipment available at this stage of the game. Excluding the chunky 10% summon damage, you're being provided a whopping 20% increase to your crit chance. As for Huntress, the story isn't all that different. As far as full sets go, Frost provides the most defense out of the four, with Huntress beating Hollow, then Titanium, and tying with Adamantite. As for armor parts, the jerking out there giving you, again, a 20% damage bonus. This also increases your summon damage by 20%, which is kinda nutty, and also has a really nice chance to save ammo. If the Squire set focuses on a higher flat damage bonus, then the Monk set focuses more on higher melee speed, which, as you'd expect, also benefits whips, tying nicely with the Summoner's Kit. The headpiece does give you a very noticeable melee speed increase, 20%, but you may prefer the Hallowed Mask's 10% increase combined with its comparative 24 defense versus Monk's 8. And picking between Squire's and Monk's chest piece might as well come down to preference given how similar they are. Now, the big baddie of the 4 armor sets, undisputed champion for summoners and strong contender for melee users, Squire Armor. Now, the main reason why the full set is preferred mostly comes from the fact that the Ballista Sentry is that much stronger than the others, especially when paired with its set bonus. While Flame Burst can't pierce and both Explosive Trap and Lightning Aura rely on things coming near them to work, the Ballista's main drawback, its low fire rate, is negated by Squire's set bonus, the Panic buff. Everything about the armor set complements itself. Its high defense and minor health regeneration encourages taking damage, whether on purpose or not. And then, you take a closer look at its stats, and despite the fairly understandable lack of minion slots, it still provides a higher summon damage bonus than Spider, Forbidden, or Hallowed. And on the chance that it would rather have more minions, you can just combine the chest piece with Spider Mask and Leggings. Matter of fact, I can understand why some people think sentries are bad. Strong as they are, you can't use them everywhere you go. During exploration, it takes time to place them down and let them do their thing. They shred bosses and handle events really nicely, but that requires a degree of remaining stationary, which won't always be the case. Which is why armor mixing is still a valid option. But enough about the armor sets, let's talk weapons. As stated before, Ogre is the new boss of the final wave, and with him comes new drops. And for a change, we actually get some weapons. 5 of them: the Sleepy Octopod, Ghastly Glaive, Brand of the Inferno, Phantom Phoenix, and Tome of Infinite Wisdom. He also drops the Huntress's Buckler and the Monk's Belt, which, again, are all clones that don't stack. Putting it bluntly, if I had to rank them on a list, it would be something like this. As far as mage options go, Tome is on the higher end of the scale. Its main attack is fast and does some pretty decent damage, but what you want out of this is its Infinite Pierce secondary attack. Compared to other available options, it has better crowd control for regular enemies and events alike, with its only real downside being the egregious mana cost. It's not surprising that a boss such as Ogre has 3 available melee options. It is, however, very surprising that the difference between them is like comparing platinum to gold to dirt. The Ghastly Glaive has good single target damage potential, though you're never using it like that. The ghosts it summons are random, but it's still more ranged than any other melee option by technicality. And the fact it's a spear means it has a very strong crowd control for invasions and groups of enemies. All in all, a great addition to your arsenal. The Brand of the Inferno is a bit of a curveball. It's definitely the strongest single target option, and it doesn't leave to be desired against groups, but as expected, it doesn't exactly excel at it due to being a broadsword. Its range is also way lower than other available options, though as a melee player that is rarely an issue. And as an added bonus, it has a built-in damage over time effect that can be combined with some flasks for maximum efficiency. However, arguably its most niche yet interesting use is the application of the parry command. If you have a shield equipped, not including the Squire shield, right-clicking raises said shield to parry the next immediate attack, negating it entirely and tripling your next strike's damage. On top of that, holding right-click gives you a whopping 20 defense. Despite removing your ability to attack directly, that's still nothing to sneeze at, and is definitely appreciated by some hybrid summoner players. And finally, the absolute bottom of the barrel, the Sleepy Octopod. On first glance, the damage isn't bad. Matter of fact, it's on par with other available options, and it outright beats them too. Now with that said, let's take a look at how it behaves. First, its range is ass. Granted, we already went over why that's not necessarily a bad thing. Fetid Bagnax has the worst range of any pre-Mac weapon, and it's still viable even for Plantera. However, Fetid Bagnax attack fast. Sleepy Octopod doesn't. That's because this weapon is supposed to slam against the floor for a small burst of damage. The tiny inconsequential issue with this. The slam does not work if you're in the air. And guess what you're going to be doing 98% of the time? In order to use this weapon effectively, you would need to time the slamming cycles just right so you could go in, hit them, and then move out. The problem is that doing that is 10 times the work for half the results of just using any other weapon. Even the ranged melee options, known for their lower damage, outperform this thing. If you ever get a Sleepy Octopod, sell it immediately. Finally, we have the Phantom Phoenix. Honestly, not even that bad for single target, though you may want something else for higher damage. Where it shines is against large crowds. The infinitely piercing Phoenix that spawns every third shot not only applies a hefty debuff, it hits everything in its way. All in all, a very solid row of weapons, all serving their purposes for the remainder of the mechs and being acceptable options even for Plantera. Speaking of, you don't get anything out of defeating her, the event only updates once the golem is down. The Dark Mage makes a return, though nothing about him changes other than stats. Ogre's weapons are far outclassed by this point, so the only thing you want out of either are cosmetics. Betsy, on the other hand, not getting ahead of ourselves. As you could have expected, you gain another list of armors. Matter of fact, melee aside, these are the final armor upgrades you get before killing the Moonlord. Being direct upgrades to their previous selves, we don't need to delve too deep into why they're good. Valhalla Knight has more armor, more health regen, and boosts the effectiveness of the best set of sentries even further. Dark Artist and Red Riding are still great for armor mixing for their respective classes, and Shinobi Infiltrator is a viable replacement for whip damage in comparison to Tiki. And when all is said and done, the stuff Betsy drops are probably the highlights of the third tier of the event. Flying Dragon, Sky Dragon's Fury, Betsy's Wrath, Aerial Bane, and Betsy's Wings. This is the first time we have an accessory that isn't a clone of the previous 4 we mentioned, so let's start with that. Cutting it short, these wings are the best available in the game. The speeds you can reach with their ability to hover is ludicrous, and since you're usually pairing with the Sora insignia, it completely defeats the purpose of any other form of mobility that aren't mounts. Granted, Empress and Duke wings are comparable, each of them providing a different effect, but when the talk is about which one is the best, you know who takes the cake. And wings aren't the only thing Betsy drops better than everyone else. There's a very good chance you have heard about this weapon, the Flying Dragon. A sword whose size is only beaten by the Breaker Blade with almost double the base damage of the Terra Blade, and a projectile that goes through walls. Suffice to say, the only reason you would have to not want to use the sword is if you really, really hate the old one's army. Although Betsy isn't all about good drops. Despite its abysmal range, the Sky Dragon's Fury outdamages the Flying Dragon if you can afford to be close to what you're attacking. Which isn't always going to happen, keep in mind, so this is still more of a drawback than you'd think. Also, its secondary attack is wildly inaccurate, and it being a ranged option means it doesn't make up for it in the damage department either, even from close range. This isn't a weak weapon, but you're fair to expect better from post-golem progression. Luckily, her other weapons don't leave to be desired. Betsy's Wrath is, cutting it short, a better Icar debuff. Its single target damage is phenomenal on top of the fact this is literally Icar 2.0, being twice as effective with a defense reduction of 30 instead of 15. Matter of fact, even as a non-mage, using this is not a bad idea, especially if you have summoners on your team. Last but far from least, the Aerial Bane. This weapon is a bit of a toss-up and the most unique of the 4, doing extra damage against airborne enemies and splitting its arrows downwards for a surprisingly effective option for crowd control. Its downside are its very short range and lack of homing, though the fact it lacks range means you won't need the homing in the first place. All in all of her drops are strong competitors for available pulse pointer options, as you'd expect, but also other post golem ones. In fact, even pillar weapons have their place in the meta challenged by them, with the Flying Dragon being by far the best melee option available. Kind of nuts to think about all this coming from the supposedly worst, most useless event in the game, as I've heard being thrown around. And I'd like to end this video by reminding you of something important. Terraria is a sandbox game. Combat is not limited by the meta, and you are not supposed to follow the most optimal route when fighting opponents. The Flying Dragon is the best melee weapon, but you can use the Terrorblade, the Daybreak, or even stuff like the Starlight or the Flare-On. Sentries are overpowered, and their respective armor sets provide you with massive, near indispensable buffs, but you can use Tiki or Spooky for summoners, you can use Beetle for melee, you can use Shrumite for ring. Okay, maybe not that last one. Don't forget to subscribe if you enjoy my content and like if you want more of it. Be civil in the comments and let me know what you think.